Hello everyone and welcome back to Leeton, and this channel is all about our journey to try and become more self-sufficient in vegetables and eggs and maybe some honey. And if you've watched the channel before, then thank you very much for coming back, and if you haven't watched the channel before, then welcome. Now today what I want to talk about is compost and making compost, and it really isn't as difficult as you might think. And with the cost of compost going through the roof at the moment, and also with it now having to go peat free, and there's so much green matter from household waste going into it, myself and from what I've seen on YouTube, a lot of other people don't think that the quality is there anymore either, and it's a bit of a concern, to be fair. So that's what today's video is all about. So go through the basics of making compost, and also it was my birthday at the weekend, and something I've wanted for a long time is a manure fork for turning compost when it cools down and it's ready to turn, and we'll go into that a bit later. Now, this is a Spear & Jackson manure fork. It was about £26 I think, and I thought I'd do a little bit of a review on it as it's a new toy and I'm doing a video on compost, so we'll do that too. Right, let's get cracking. Okay, so this is a compost. It's a temporary heap that I've built because if you watch previous videos you'll know that we're in the throes of organising our garden into a proper vegetable plot. But for now, as we're clearing the garden, doing work in the house and everything else, we've got several temporary compost heaps. And as you can see from this one, there's all kinds of material in it, and to make compost what you need is organic material. So plants that you pulled up, weeds, yes, you can put weeds in there if you can get the compost hot. Now the heat comes from that bacterial matter, etc., in the pile of debris getting hot, and what that will do, it should kill weed seeds, etc. If you can't make a big heap like this, I mean this one's probably the best part of 1.5 meters square, I would imagine, then you can buy the small plastic Dalek bins, or you could make a small compost heap as well. And the only difference is they probably won't get hot because they're just not big enough. That doesn't mean though it won't rot down and turn into compost, because it will. And in a previous garden that's exactly what I did, and it worked fine. It just took longer to rot down because it didn't get the heat. So as you can see in this compost pile here, there is various material. We've got ash from fires, we've got weeds and grass cuttings, we've got cardboard. Cardboard is a good addition to compost because it adds the carbon into the pile. So you need two ingredients really. You need greens and you need browns, and so things like grass cuttings, they would be greens. Things like your potato plants, when you've dug your spuds up, they would be greens. Things like wood chip, cardboard, etc., they're your browns, and you want to try and add them in equal amounts. And if you can add them in layers, even better. So a layer of brown, a layer of green, a layer of brown, a layer of green. Now that isn't always possible because it depends what you've got available, and this pile is just being added to constantly as we gather things from the plot. So if you can make a pile in one go, so you can save the materials and you can completely fill the pile in one go, that is a better way of doing it, because it gives it a chance to heat up straight away, and you don't get that necessarily when you're adding to it constantly. I mean, this is only about half full, and it'll probably take the rest of the summer to fill this up, because as we're adding things to it, it's also rotting down. Now, when we're talking about temperature, one of these is really useful. So this is a compost thermometer, and as you can see, the center of this pile is about 28 degrees. In a perfect world, you want it in the green area, but if it goes into the hot area, don't worry about it. 60-65 is about as hot as you want to go. If you're getting hotter than that, then you really are starting to kill any good stuff in there too. So yesterday I gave the grass a quick trim, and so the grass cuttings have gone in there. We've just ripped up a lot of cardboard and put that in because we had a delivery of some stuff. We wanted to get rid of the cardboard, and also underneath that cardboard is quite a thick layer of greens. Toilet rolls, they can go in. Your kitchen scraps, so anything that you take out the kitchen, that vegetable waste, etc., that hasn't been cooked, although we put cooked rice, cooked pasta, we'll put mouldy bread in there, etc. The only problem with putting cooked food in, and especially things like meat, etc., it isn't that it won't rot down, and it isn't that it will do any harm to the compost, it's that it could attract vermin. So you've got to be very careful with that. Now, anything that's really twiggy, like these sort of things, we put to one side, and we will, when we've got a pile of them, we'll shred them, and we'll put those in all together as a layer of browns. But you can see that this heap is made up of all kinds of material. Now, the two heaps behind me here, these ones are smaller than the one we've just been looking at, and they've been there for probably 3 or 4 months now. This one I've already turned once. Now, turning is a process that you do to put oxygen back into the heap. You need 2 things, or 3 things really, to make compost. You need the organic matter and the brown matter, the dead matter, to start with. You need oxygen, and you need moisture, because the bacteria and the microbes, etc., that turn the organic matter into compost need moisture and oxygen. So when you use your thermometer and your pile goes up in temperature, gets up to 50 or 60 degrees or whatever it is, and then it cools down, the chances are it needs to be either turned or it's dried out and it needs some moisture. And watering a compost heap with a watering can, for example, is a good idea. And when it's hot, I will be watering these probably every few days, because they're small heaps and they dry out quickly. That said, if you have too much water and the compost becomes wet, or you've got too much green matter in there and not enough brown, then it can go anaerobic and it goes all horrible, smelly and slimy. And it will rot, but not very nicely, if you know what I mean. It will just be a mess. So you need to have the balance of green and brown, and you need to have a good balance of oxygen and water, moisture. And I suspect both of these heaps now, they've gone cold. I know they've gone cold, and they both need turning, and they both need some moisture. I've got these covered with plastic sheet to prevent really heavy rain putting too much water in there, but obviously what that also does is it stops rain getting in to keep it moist. So what I'm going to do now is take the fronts off these heaps, clear an area so that I can rake out one of them, and then I'm going to put the other one into the one that I've emptied, and then the one that I've emptied put into that one. And I'm going to swap them over, and we'll see what condition it is, we'll see how it's rotting down, and maybe put some water in there, etc. And while we're doing that, I can test out this manure fork. Okay, so I've got that bay at the end there empty, and I don't know, that took probably 15 minutes, something like that. What I'm going to do now is put the front back on the bay and empty this bay straight into that one. Then when I've got my compost bay set up properly down the end of the garden, I'll always have an empty bay next to the one that is ready to be turned, and then I'm not having to drag it all out like this. I just don't have that option at the moment, and but at least I've only had to drag the one out, and I can now turn the other one straight into the empty bay. But what I will say about the pile that I've just dragged out here is it was made up of a lot of moss, because we scarified the lawn. A lot of moss, a lot of like grass cuttings, things like that. And to put the carbon in, I added a lot of wood chip, because we cut some big trees down here and we shredded all the small branches. And I've got to say that this is looking really good now. There's still quite a bit of woody stuff in it, but I'd say another couple of months and it will be ready. And I've just squeezed a bit together and it's holding together nicely. It's not fully decomposed yet at all, but it isn't too wet, it's just damp. And I think this turning will reactivate it, and I think it will get hot again for the third time. So let's get the front back on that bay, and then we'll tip that one into that one. Okay, so that bay is now in that bay, and so that'll put a lot of oxygen into it. And as I was going, I was turning it over, I was, you know, is it wet enough, is it damp, which it was. Any large lumps that haven't broken down much, make sure they go into the middle of the pile, because the middle of the pile is the hottest part. And all I've got to do now is put the blocks back on that pile there, the wall, and then put all this in there. So everything from the first pile into there now, and that's both piles turned. Probably taken half an hour, 40 minutes in total, and it'll be interesting. I'll put the thermometer in there in a couple of days. It'll take a couple of days for it to warm back up, and I bet that they have increased in temperature up to probably 40-50 degrees on a second heat up. So crack on. Right then, so that's both piles turned, and don't underestimate the workout either when you're doing it. It's you know, it gets you puffing a little bit, and better to just take your time, take it steady. So what can I tell you about the Spear and Jackson manure fork? Well, it did the job okay, and the reason I wanted a manure fork was I'm quite tall, I'm 6'1", so using a normal fork, for the garden fork for this sort of thing, it's quite back-breaking. I'm constantly bending over, whereas with a manure fork, a longer handle, I can remain a bit more upright, at least for most of it anyway. And this is a 48-inch fork, so quite long, and the tines have not bent or anything like that. All the welds still look good. It was quite comfortable. The handle's about the right thickness for me, and what's that, probably, like this end's probably about 35mm diameter, and down there a bit bigger, perhaps 45. And yeah, very comfortable for the money. Probably a good buy, really. And the only thing I'll say, and I'm sure it's just because this fork slipped through quality control, I'm sure they're not all like this, but where the handle actually meets the fork there, can you see that step? I'll try and get it right for the camera, something like that. Yeah, the handle is a slightly larger diameter than the fork, but it's offset, so this side here is smooth, and then there's a step here, and I'm just thinking, if you were to be constantly holding it in that area, it was doing, you know, sliding in your hand, whether that would cause you a blister or something, but I can sort that out. I can shave that back and sand it. So yeah, overall, Spear and Jackson manure fork for about 26 quid on Amazon. 48-inch, quite happy. It's quite light, and certainly lighter than my garden fork anyway. And yeah, there's a number there, 1600HS manure fork, LK 48-inch. So yeah, be a nice tool going forward, especially when I've got my compost bin set up down the bottom of the garden, and I can then turn one into an empty bin all the time, and this will really speed things up. So I've put the thermometer in one of these bays now, and it's reading 20 degrees, so just a little higher than ambient, I would say. What I'll do the next time I do a video, which will probably be in a couple of days, we will take a look at it, and we will see if turning the compost heap has increased the temperature by putting oxygen in, and I'm pretty confident it will have done. I haven't added any water to these because they feel moist, and too much water, all that does is push the oxygen out of the pile, so there's no point. So that's it, folks. Really, all you need to make compost in your garden, this is green matter, brown matter. Put it in layers, 3 or 4 inch layers, and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until you either fill up your plastic bin or you fill up your pile, and then leave it. If you get yourself a thermometer, that really helps you know what's happening in the heap. So you'll see the temperature go up if it's a big enough pile. It has to be a certain size really to get hot, but you'll see the temperature go up, and then when it cools down, maybe that's the time to turn it. And some people only turn their piles once, some people turn them lots, you know. I only turn the pile when the temperature cools down and I think it needs it. So sometimes that would be 2 times, sometimes that might be 4 times. I guess it really depends on what's in the pile and time of year, ambient temperature, etc, etc. So thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.